How do you know who you belong to? How do we know when we've reached a point where we have to stop drifting and actually decide where we stand? Just remember that covenant life cannot run on inherited momentum forever. And in Joshua chapter 24, we're going to unpack Joshua's final challenge at Shechem, the call to choose whom you will serve, and the stone of witness that marks the people's decision. And I'll give you one immediate action to help you make a real public choice for the Lord this week in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. Alright, so Joshua chapter 24 is Joshua's final covenant renewal speech. He rehearses God's history with Israel from Abraham through the Exodus, and he gives the people a direct choice between the Lord and other gods. He renews the covenant at Shechem and sets up a stone of witness, and the chapter closes with Joshua's death, the burial of Joseph's bones, and a summary that Israel served the Lord all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua. It is a fitting end, memory, choice, witness, and burial that all testify that God's promise has been faithful. Okay, so let's read the first 13 verses. The focus here is that Joshua is going to rehearse God's saving history, and my question for you is, why begin with history instead of a direct command? So, let's read the first 13 verses. Verse 1, Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel. And they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, Long ago your ancestors, Terah and his sons, Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates and served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan, and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I gave Esau the hill country of Seir to possess, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in its midst. And afterwards I brought you out. When I brought your ancestors out of Egypt, you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued your ancestors with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. When they cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and made the sea come upon them and cover them, and your eyes saw what I did to Egypt. Afterward you lived in the wilderness a long time. Then I brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived on the other side of the Jordan. They fought with you, and I handed them over to you, and you took possession of their land, and I destroyed them before you. Then King Balak, son of Zippor of Moab, set out to fight against Israel. He sent and invited Balaam, son of Beor, to curse you, but I would not listen to Balaam. Therefore he blessed you, so I rescued you out of his hand. When you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, the citizens of Jericho fought against you, as well as the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I handed them over to you. I sent swarms of hornets ahead of you, that drove out before you the two kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and towns that you had not built, and you live in them. You eat the fruits of the vineyard and olive yards that you did not plant. Alright, biblical unlock number 1. Joshua starts with Abraham, Egypt, and the wilderness instead of, obey me now, because the obedience that he is expecting grows out of remembrance. Joshua again wants Israel to see that the Lord has already acted first and acted repeatedly. This history, or what we're seeing here, is not decoration, it is actually the basis for trust. If God has carried them from Abraham to the land, then the people have every reason to answer him with loyalty. So, memory, that is the seedbed of gratitude and faith. And the past is not dead, but actually it grounds the present obedience. And the history is wide-ranging because remember that the covenant faith is not built on a single moment, but rather a whole story, so that the people they can't reduce God to one event or one season or one particular thing, but rather the Lord's faithfulness is long, patient, and cumulative, even though our interest is transient. So that's the idea. There is repeated testimony, rehearsed history that constantly strengthens the heart. Okay, let's read verses 14 to 18 now. You're going to see a very important quote in here. I'm not going to say which one it is, but you'll be able to see it straight away. And my question for you is, why does covenant renewal require a real choice? Verse 14, "Now therefore revere the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your ancestors served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Then the people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight. He protected us along all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God." So the key question that I was alluding to is in verse 15. "Choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors and so on and so forth, and all of those false gods, or will we serve the Lord?" This is important because Joshua is not forcing a choice. What this is implying is a real sort of choice that we have, free will in this particular instance. So what we're seeing here is the covenant cannot be inherited by habit forever. The people actually must choose whether the Lord is truly their God, or whether they're going to just keep their old gods with lowercase g in their hearts. And Joshua refuses the neutral ground. Memory must become commitment, and the spiritual freedom is the refusal to be divided and ruled by divided loyalties. So choice is not actually optional in covenant life. And what's interesting here, and right at the end we saw, "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Why is this even present? It's because leadership starts with personal resolve, because Joshua is not asking the people to do something he himself will not do. He's actually modeling the household faith, and the leader's choice shapes the household, and the household becomes a visible witness to the nations. This is important because the household is the first place where discipleship can actually become concrete. So we must remember that covenant choice shows up first at home. Okay, let's read verses 19 to 24. The focus here is going to be Joshua warning the people about the seriousness of serving God. And my question to you is, why does Joshua sound so severe after inviting them to choose? Verse 19, "But Joshua said to the people, 'You cannot serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good.'" Verse 21, "And the people said to Joshua, 'No, we will serve the Lord.' Then Joshua said to the people, 'You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him.' And they said, 'We are witnesses.' He said, 'Then put away the foreign gods that are among you, and incline your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel.' And then the people said to Joshua, 'The Lord our God we will serve, and him we will obey.' So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem. Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak in the sanctuary of the Lord. Joshua said to all the people, 'See, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore it shall be a witness against you, if you deal falsely with your God.' So Joshua sent the people away to their inheritances." So I read up until verse 28 there because it was quite important. And what do we see? We see that Joshua warns them sharply after inviting them to choose. And what he's asking them is not saying, "Oh, there's no choice here. You obviously have free will. You could choose not to." But he's saying the stakes are really high. And he wants them to count the cost honestly. Serving the Lord is not a sentimental hobby. It's not a club. It is a holy allegiance to the God who is jealous, not in the sense of a sin, but rather in the same way that a husband and wife should be jealous for each other's love and should not be shared with other people, right? So in the same way, the relationship that we have with God is like a bridegroom and a bride, and God does not want us, God will not share his love for us with some idols and whatnot. So that's what he means by that. And it's interesting because God is jealous for his people's love, and Joshua's severity is actually mercy. It stops them from making a shallow promise. So this is important because love that tells the truth often is read as warnings, right? So a warning is often love that tells the truth because it loves you so much that it is not willing to let you make wrong decisions. And he says again, he is a holy God, right? So it means that God cannot be treated like some mascot. Okay, his holiness exposes hidden, divided loyalties. Okay, and this demands that service is sincere, that the people are warned, that pretending is impossible before God, because God is omniscient. He knows what you're going to do. Okay, God sees the heart, not just the outward words. Okay, so that's important. The covenant speech that you say, if you profess to do something, to say something, to be someone, it must be matched by your covenant life. And you'll notice that they put a stone. What was the point of that stone? Why did they have to have that there? That's actually important because the covenant stone, or why does the covenant need a stone, is to reinforce that sort of memory which fades. And stone is a physical witness that the people choose the Lord and they have accepted the terms of the covenant. It will stand long after your emotions have cooled, reminding the future generations that words were spoken before God. So again, these valuable, visible signs help us to remember, okay? It helps with memory and accountability. And there are material witnesses that can protect spiritual seriousness. But then why does Joshua send the people away after this? The reason why is because the renewal is complete. The covenant has been rehearsed, chosen, and marked, and now the people must live it out in ordinary time. So, again, worship is the beginning of faithful living. It's not the end. And the ceremony is actually rooted in daily obedience, not just a transient sort of action. Okay, verses 29 to 33, we're going to go through Joshua's death now, Joseph's bones, and Israel's memory. And my question to you is, why end with burial and bones after such a triumphant speech? Verse 29, after these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. They buried him in his own inheritance at Timnath Serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. Verse 31, Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the work that the Lord did for Israel. The bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the portion of ground that Jacob had bought from the children of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. It became an inheritance of the descendants of Joseph. Verse 33, Eleazar, son of Aaron, died, and they buried him at Gibeath, the town of his son Phinehas, which had been given him in the hill country of Ephraim. Alright, so final biblical unlock. The last one, why do you need to end with burial and bones? It shows that the book is closed, and it closed with fulfilled promises and an unfinished generation. Joshua dies, Joseph's bones are buried in the land he believed God would give, and the people are left with memory as their inheritance. So the graves become testimony. God keeps his word across generations. So this is important. It's burial, it's remembrance, it's a sign of hope, not just loss. And death does not cancel the covenant faithfulness. It continues to persist long after the death of its servants. Okay, let's see how Joshua 24, the final chapter of Joshua, fulfills Jesus Christ. So Joshua chapter 24 calls people to choose, remember, and serve with a whole heart. And in Christ, this choice is clearer and deeper because Jesus is the Lord whom we must serve and trust. He is the one who tells us not only to decide, but to abide in him. He is the true witness of the covenant, the one whose death and resurrection seals God's faithfulness forever. Joshua says, choose this day, but Christ says, follow me. And his call is not just to decision, but to a lifelong belonging to himself. And this is why he says in John chapter 14, verse 21, they who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me, and those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. This is so important because this is all about gospel obedience. Love proves itself by keeping the Lord's word. You can't say you love your spouse and then cheat on her, right? Love is shown, it's implement it. It's visible through our actions. We work out our salvation with fear and trembling, as Paul writes in Philippians. And this is really important in understanding our walk with God. Okay, let's see how we can apply this chapter in our everyday life. So, I think it's important to remember something, which is that we have a choice. Every single day we have a choice. As for me and my house, as for me and my household, what will we do? Okay, how can we serve the Lord this week? And this is something that we can do. Choose this today. Make a covenant declaration. This is what I'm going to do today in order to live and serve the Lord. And the second thing is have a visible reminder, like that stone, something that reminds you, that points you back to God's faithfulness. Whether it be a verse card, a note, an object, something, and then tell someone why it belongs there. Alright, that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. We learned in this episode that Joshua begins with history so that the people's choice rests on remembered grace, that covenant faith cannot remain inherited habit. It requires a real decision. Joshua's severity is mercy because God is holy and not to be treated lightly. The stone of witness turns a spoken covenant into public memory, and the chapter ends with burial and bones so that future generations know the promise was real. Next time we're going to move from Joshua's covenant renewal to the judges who follow in Judges chapter 1. We're going to unpack the struggle after settlement, the incomplete obedience that lingers, and why the land still needs faithful hands. You don't want to miss it. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.